You should see what happened in the G20. That was, where the banksters from the globe came over to Pittsburgh last week. Yeah, we use sound weapons and microwave weapons on people, on children. We beat women with clubs and let dogs bite them. Old women coming out of stores. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Here I have something for you. This is a gentleman who writes for Rolling Stone. His name's Matt Tiebe. And why he's important is maybe you should learn about naked short selling, the counterfeiting of equity shares, that's stocks, and how it was used to take down Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, and how these people knew about it. And the big important piece to catch here is the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. Once again, more crooks that are, covered by your government are hiding the true perpetrators. Just like with 9/11, when people put the, put the shorts or the puts on United Airlines and American Airlines before the attacks, 14 times more than ever in history, and the SEC didn't tell you, huh? So check this out.
With us now, Rolling Stone's Matt Tiebe. He's got a recent piece in the Rolling Stone magazine. Of course, when he writes a piece, Wall Street quivers because he's been exposing greed and corruption there over the last year or so that led to the market collapse. In his latest piece in this week's issue of Rolling Stone, he explores what started it all, the collapse of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. Matt writes this: on Tuesday, March 11th, 2008, somebody, nobody knows who, made one of the craziest bets Wall Street has ever seen. The mystery figure spent $1.7 million on a series of options, gambling that shares in the venerable investment bank Bear Stearns would lose more than half their value in 9 days or less. It was madness, like buying 1.7 million lottery tickets, according to one financial analyst. But what's even crazier is that the bet paid. Matt, good to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so we laid it out there in pretty general terms. Just kind of flesh it out a little for our audience, what we're talking about here.
Well, the important thing about this story is that the evidence clearly suggests that there was massive manipulation that went on in both the Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers episodes. The options that I talk about at the beginning of the piece, where somebody bets that a major company is going to lose half its value within less than 2 weeks. That's part of it, but there was also an enormous number of undelivered shares, naked short selling of these stocks, essentially counterfeiting these stocks during these runs on these companies. And the amount is just, the evidence here is just basically incontrovertible. Clearly somebody was manipulating these stocks in a kind of bear raid, and the real problem is that nothing was really done about it then or since.
I asked you earlier this morning, what are we talking about here? What's the underlying implication, that the government was involved in manipulating this?
No, more likely this is a series of private interests, probably some hedge funds and some investment banks working in concert. The problem is we don't know. We don't know who it is. It would be a relatively easy matter for the SEC to uncover who made these bets and who was manipulating things from behind the scenes, but they haven't released that information publicly, so we just don't know. But it is pretty clear that there was manipulation that went on in these two instances.
Does the C in SEC stand for clueless?
I think it does.
Well, clearly, I mean, I think this is one of these things where you look at the numbers and you say, this was clearly a crime in progress. And in fact, the SEC issued subpoenas that summer after Bear collapsed, trying to find out who was behind the naked short selling, both of Bear and of Lehman Brothers, and yet they allowed the collapse of Lehman Brothers to happen after that. So clearly they were aware of the problem and they just didn't do anything about it.
Do they know who it was, or are they just not telling? And they do know who did that. I mean, you got, what, 1.7 million shares? I mean, these things got to be reported. There's all kinds of reporting requirements, are there not?
Right. Well, they know who it is. I mean,
but we don't know who it is?
We don't know who it is. That's right. Yeah.
One of the reasons that people on Wall Street love you is that basically you spell out these things as they happen as one big game of insider trading.
Right.
Where everybody knows one another and things go down like that overnight and the public doesn't know. With that theme, could you spell out what happened to Bear Stearns? How could it be $62 a share on a Friday night or whatever and be sold for $2 a share to J.P. Morgan on a Sunday morning? How does that happen?
Well, first of all, Bear was a mess. It was a company that was massively over-leveraged. It had an enormous number of toxic investments in the subprime market, so it didn't need much of a push over the cliff, but it did get a push. There are all kinds of ways you can attack these companies. One is naked short selling, which again is basically counterfeiting the stock. You're devaluing the stock by selling shares that you don't have. Another one is buying credit default swaps, which is sort of like an insurance policy. You're betting against the company. And you can pull credit lines, you can spread rumors in the media. All these things are things that we saw with Bear Stearns. But the important thing in that incident was that the government helped negotiate a price, a buyout price for J.P. Morgan Chase. So Bear was trading at 30 on Friday afternoon, and it went down to 2 on Sunday when the deal was struck.
And it's true, even as we sit here right now, someone's creating new derivatives, new projects to beat the SEC again.
Oh, absolutely. There's a roundtable going on right now on naked short selling, and the people who are for the strictest reforms weren't even invited. So.
Matt Taibbi, you're just going to have to keep coming back and stay on this. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. Great work.
So you get a better understanding how crooks work in Wall Street, huh? Yeah. And who allows this to happen? Okay, well, here's one. Well, let's go back to the Hardin, Montana thing, because even in Massachusetts, we have a fusion center. Let's find out what a fusion center is good for. Have you heard about the fusion centers? That's because the whole 9/11 false flag, okay, and this whole war on terrorism, and terror and war go together. I mean, it's like a war on war. But the interesting thing is these fusion centers, since 9/11, you out there, your child could be Al-Qaeda. You might be a domestic terrorist. They passed all these laws. This whole thing was a false flag so that they could bring upon a military police state, and you're starting to see it more and more. You're starting to see training for gun confiscations. You're starting to see that, you know, oh, I could get so into it. But for you, hey, check this piece out. You've got a fusion center in Massachusetts because we have to spy on the people that aren't even crooks.
The debate over your privacy versus your security has been heating up ever since the government intensified its watch for terrorists operating within our borders. Now the case of one man who took a picture of the governor and ended up in jail is shining a light on another secret way the government may be keeping an eye on you. Jerry Willis here now with another report in our series, Watching You 24/7. I don't think most people have any idea that this is going on.
That's absolutely right. Well, since 9/11, there have been a lot of debate about privacy rights in the age of terrorism. Well, fusion centers are state-run domestic intelligence centers that have access to a lot of your personal data. Some feel they're central to the war on terrorism, but others are worried that they're gathering too much info on people who are not suspected of crimes.
I dropped the bike.
It was the morning of Connecticut Governor Jody Rell's inaugural parade.
Pulled out my camera, and I just shoot Governor Rell, about 23 shots.
Moments later, Ken Krajewski was stopped by Hartford police officers, handcuffed, arrested, and jailed.
I said, well, what did I do? And I said, you shouldn't have been making those threats.
Local police had been on the lookout for him after state police gave out a security bulletin with his photo on it. Officials wouldn't comment pending a civil lawsuit, but court documents reveal state police were alarmed by Krajewski's blog posts. Who's going to protest the inaugural ball with me? And no need to make nice.
Why do I have to be nice to a political figure simply because she won an election?
Police began digging for more information, mining public and commercial databases. They learned Krajewski had been a Green Party campaign director, had protested a gubernatorial debate, and had once been convicted for civil disobedience. He had no history of violence. Law professor Daniel Citron says police aren't supposed to gather information on citizens who aren't suspected of a crime.
If we're interested in someone because they're an advocate for a Green Party candidate, and we think they're suspicious because they want to get other people to protest someone's ideas, but not because we think there's a true threat to their lives, I think that's just troubling.
Today, law enforcement collects and shares more information than ever, and much of it goes on at state intelligence centers called fusion centers. Fusion centers were started after 9/11 to help federal, state, and local law enforcement connect the dots and stop a terrorist attack. The Department of Homeland Security says they are a critical tool in keeping the nation safe.
In a typical fusion center, an FBI agent might be sitting next to a state highway patrol officer. They don't merely share space. They share databases and techniques.
But what's going into those databases has critics worried. The ACLU says there's evidence that some fusion centers have targeted Muslim groups and peace activists for surveillance.
Collecting information about people that has no relevance to whether or not they're breaking the law.
We're in the center of the analysis element where we have...
The director of New Jersey's Fusion Center says law enforcement works hard to balance national security with individual privacy.
We in law enforcement, and certainly in fusion centers, are very attuned to the Bill of Rights. We are not in the business of investigating First Amendment or constitutionally protected rights.
But Ken Krajewski thinks police in his town crossed the line.
The police did not determine the difference between who was dangerous and who was merely expressing protected constitutionally protected viewpoints.